Bob Dubac, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Dubac. Yeah. Now, first of all, at what drug-induced moment did you stick something in your ear and realize that you had the ability and went, that's a closer?
Yeah, that was it. I have that, and I says, now all I got to do is write 60 minutes worth of material, because I have... it's something that I could always do. It's kind of a birth defect that I have. My father could do it. I have a grandfather who could do it, so I guess it's in the DNA. But actually, there are muscles in the back of your heads. Can you do it? Can you do them one at a time, though? See, what I would do is I'd sleep on one side when I was real little, and I'd move one. I'd sleep on the other side and move the other. And then when I go to school, when I was a kid, I would do it to crack the class up. And, of course, the nuns couldn't see what... You wonder why I'm against religion, because I was raised by nuns, okay? So they couldn't see what was going on. They just thought Satan was in the room somewhere. And then when I started, when I first started, there were no comedy clubs. There was, I was opening for rock and roll bands, and I figured, well, if I stick cigarettes in my ears and wiggle them, and the audience is already stoned, I got it made, man.
And when I first met you, I was in Denver at the Comedy Works, and I was an open micer there, and that was about 1980, I think.
May have been, yes.
Right in there. How long had you been? Because that was the very beginning of the comedy expansion of clubs.
Right. Well, I was already doing it, for rock and roll bands, basically. So I already had this act. It was kind of a magic carrot top.
What rock and roll bands?
Well, all of them.
Really?
Everywhere. I started in the South, so it was the Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner, all the Southern rock and roll guys, and then my agents down there booked me I actually opened for the Police on their first tour, and this is when nobody knew them. We started, because my agent in Macon was Ian Copeland. Ian said, well, I've got a brother named Stuart, and he's got some chums in a band, and my other brother, Miles, is their manager. Why don't we bring him over here and see if they'll play some music in our clubs? So I opened up because they couldn't afford to have another band open up for them, and I would do these goofy little magic trick jokes. And I had an Econoline van, and they had loaded their little drums and guitars in 2 Econoline vans, and we drove from Atlanta to Nashville. We played the Exit to the Bijou in Philly. By the time we got to Pittsburgh, they were huge. And they left me in Pittsburgh all by myself. It took these guys like 3 acts, three cities before they started playing music on the radio. And it's like, sorry, Bob, you're going to have to find your way back home.
So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I used to hitchhike down here. I'd come from Atlanta, I'd take 75, which didn't come all the way down here. I'd get over and then hitchhike. I would work, I had these little, like I said, these magic tricks, and I would do them in little bars for tips and waitresses. And go all the way around to the other side and go back up and then go back to school.
And you mentioned your family.
Let me get this out of your way. Is that blocking you? Okay, good, thanks.
So the cigarette thing was passed down generation to generation.
I guess I was the only one who kind of exploited it.
That made money off of it. The rest of them
came to me and said, "Hey, we want our cut." So.
And did you go to college?
Yes, I did. I went to the University of Georgia. But I would go to school, and then I would go on the road. So it was a quarter system back then, so you'd go to school now it's semester. But it was 4 quarters. You'd go to school for a quarter, because my father we didn't have the money to afford, so I had to pay my way. And the way I paid my way was opening up for these bands, and then I'd go back to school, back and forth until I was done.
And what was the degree?
Psychology and journalism.
You ever used either one?
What do you think? Yes.
Now, and it sounds like, did you ever have other jobs, like out of college?
Never had a job.
No.
This is the only job. Showbiz has been the only job I've had. I actually worked a couple of times as a bartender, but I really didn't pour drinks. I was just doing magic tricks behind a bar.
Yeah, that's the same with me. Yeah. And then we got into this because we really felt like it wasn't a job.
Yeah, I said, because I don't want to go and punch a clock, sit behind a bar. I'd rather come up here for 20, 30 minutes and call it a day.
So then you.
I know it really pisses you off, doesn't it? Yeah. Although a lot of you are in the same boat as we are. You work 20, 30 minutes a day, right?
Actual work.
Yes. Or you're not working at all.
Longer. Yeah. That's right. And whether you realize this or not, we talked about the stand-up comedy, and as Bob was saying that before 1980, there weren't clubs.
No.
Across there were just a handful of places where you do stand-up, and then from 1980 till about 85, there was 1,000.
Yeah.
Clubs.
You know, but what I don't think people realize too is even before our generation, when you had the Catskills guys, there was the Catskills, but there weren't any clubs then. There were a couple of places like Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, and there were a couple of Playboy clubs. But even before that, when it was Jack Benny and George Burns era, these guys would go actually to weddings that they weren't invited to. But they were somewhat known, so they had an audience to try out their jokes because there was nowhere to go. I don't know if you ever knew that or not.
I didn't know that, but I know that
they would
our
go
audience knows that.
Yes.
You're in Sarasota. They were at those weddings.
And those guys were older. Yes.
Oh, no. We're Venice. I read the other day that Venice, Florida's average age is 69. 69 really? Years old. Yeah.
But you know, 69 though now that's the age. I mean, James Bond, Sean Connery is in his 80s now, right?
Yes.
So that means all you little blue-haired old ladies, you were doing James Bond in your mind. I know you were, weren't you? So we know you guys have got a little experience here.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So we can talk trash.
First time my grandmother came to see a performance, you always think about when they hear the word fuck, because our generation of comics is the reason that we say that out loud now. And my grandmother came, and there was a lot. I don't think we did 50. You were at about 13, right?
Yeah, I did. I could tell.
And I asked her, I said, did that bother you? And she goes, we've been doing it longer than you've been saying it. I said, well, exactly. What am I thinking? You know. Now, yes. You've done so much. You've been kind of hit the high points of your career because you've done a lot of the talk shows, Carson, the whole 9 yards. Right?
I did. Those are all. You know, I mean, you everything kind of goes in a roll, and you know, it's really hard nowadays. I imagine to stay, you know, on the top of the heap. There's only a few places there for people, but you know, it's been. I was on a soap opera for a number of years that was canceled. So
it wasn't you though.
It was because of me. I think it was canceled. That was. I did a lot of kind of sitcom acting and stuff, but nothing that would be known. It's just all the character actors. And what I found was, this is really the only place where you can be your own guy. You can be your own gal. You can say, I'm going to write the stuff. I'm going to do it. If it flies, I get credit. If it doesn't fly, and I don't really care if it's at this point if it's 25 people at a wedding or or a funeral. I do funerals in case anybody has somebody that passed that has a good sense of humor, and maybe we'll raise them from the dead. I don't know. Is that really going too far for you guys? You really worried about that? Okay, all right. But I think it's just the fact that this is what you get to. I mean, the shows that I do in theaters around the world are shows that I've written and that I do. Sometimes I hire other actors who do them. I don't know. Where's anybody at the Van Wezel last week by any chance? No.
Pardon?
Oh, yeah. Were you? Oh, you said. Oh, so you did. So, this is nothing like what I did there. No, good?
She said, no, good.
Yeah. But, I mean, they're both a different, you can get the video of one of them on Amazon, I think. It's called The Male Intellect, if you want.
And that leads to the next question.
Yes.
Started in stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy, boom. When we first got into it, we were lucky enough to be at the beginning of a fad. And that's really a fun place to be.
Yeah, it is.
There was more work than there were entertainers to take the work.
Right.
So we were working right out of the box. And then after about 10 years, it seems like fads have about a 10-year to 15-year lifespan. That's about it. And then it just starts to bottom out on the other end. And so we got into the mid-'90s, and we all saw the handwriting on the wall. There's a lot more comedians and a lot fewer clubs, and the competition's getting very, very keen. And at that, where was the point where did you see that, and that was your transition to theater, or at least formatting kind of your stand-up comedy into a theater performance?
No, back then in the late '80s, there were at the same time myself, I'll mention 4 or 5 other guys you've never heard of, and then along with Tim Allen and Jerry Seinfeld, Roseanne Barr, we all had our pilots for sitcoms, and we all did them. There's, you know, you roll the dice, and a couple of them hit. The ones that hit, those are the people that did it. The rest of us, we realize, okay, that's the shot you get. It's not going to happen again. And then everybody is running around trying to get that shot, and then I see, okay, there's all of us who are really on stage doing the same things, and I says, wait a minute, there's nobody, a lot of you would like to go to see something that's, you know, that's funny, but you kind of are afraid to go to the theater sometimes, unless it's a musical. I mean, that's different here in Sarasota, though. Sarasota is very well, you know, adapted to the arts. You guys really support it, which is terrific. But there's a lot of cities like Oklahoma City that just. Well,
there's nobody listening to this from Oklahoma City. I think you're safe.
Yeah.
And nobody moves here from Oklahoma City. We don't know why.
Well, that's because you need a vocabulary to get here.
Sooner or not.
All right, so, but they, you know, if you come to them, it's like a field of dreams. Build it and they will come. So you go to the cities and you do these things. And, you know, like the show that I did at the Van Wezel, I mean, it's real clean and it's all about men and women. And it's, you know, it's fun. And the next show that I'm doing is a little bit, they got the things that I was trying out tonight here. It's about trying to find the truth from illusion, because you can't tell anymore. You know, is it fact or is it fiction? Is it a blank stare or is it Botox? I don't know. I can't tell anymore. So, I mean, I consciously made the effort because I knew, because there are still guys my age that are still making a living doing comedy clubs, which is fun, but it can be, it ruins marriages, it ruins, you know, your lifestyle. I mean, there's a lot of guys that we know that haven't come out the other end very well.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. You know, it's hard to be on the road that much, and that's what
Right.
we are. You're on the, at least when you're doing that, you're traveling all the time. And when you're traveling all the time and your wife or your significant other is somewhere else and you're not there most of the time, it's hard to keep that together unless you have a lot of money, People they still won't say faithful, but they will act like they do.
I've been married for 16 years, and I brought my wife with me. We decided not to have kids because we were too selfish. And, so we would travel around. But when I would go and do the show, sometimes or some of these shows that I do, I would go and it would run in a city for 5 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. So we would just move to the city and go, okay, here's an adventure. We live there. And then we bring our dogs with us. So we got little Chihuahuas that carry them on the plane. They're service dogs. They are. I mean, you can actually get a little vest that goes over them, and you go to the airline and say, "Hey, it's a service dog." Yeah, and I got another one too. And all 3 of them add up to about the size of a dog. And you know, they say, "What do you need it for?" And I said, "So I say I need it for hearing now because I lost my hearing here, in this ear." The idea of what I was saying earlier about the brain damage is true. But I didn't slip on a patch of ice or I didn't get mugged. I actually had an acoustic neuroma, which is a brain tumor that was taken out. And when they took it out, they had to shrink my brain and move it over to the right. And I watched Fox News for about a month while I was doing this. Got you again. Got there. No. And then it shifted back over. And,
it was interesting. You were telling me other night, we were talking about you can't do crowd work anymore. Because you hear everything from one side.
Right, so I've got this little device here. I don't know if you can you see it over there? Oh my God, who's the blonde?
Star Trek.
Yeah, it is. I've got like a Frankenstein plug, and this little thing just snaps onto it, and what it does, your bone conducts sound waves. So the sound that comes from here, it's wired so that it goes into my good ear here, but when I'm listening, it's like I've got fake stereo. It's really mono. So whenever you say, anybody who says anything, it sounds like it's coming over from here. So I would do things and people would shout in the crowd and I would think it's be somebody here and I'm talking to this person here and it's really somebody over there. And I'm saying, why are you doing this guy's over here? And so when I do this, and I didn't do it tonight, but I usually tell people, I say, look, you got to raise your hand because if you're going to talk, because I can't tell where you are. You're just going to make me look like a fool.
So your friends could really screw with you.
Well, they can, but I can screw with my friends. I don't have to sit on the right side of the ones I don't want to listen to. You know,
so your show. I've watched it now, and it's neat watching any comedian work on something that they're getting ready to that we're going to see the culmination of it soon. And we've had a few comics in doing it. Louis C.K. was here a while back, and that was fun watching that, and it's fun watching you do it. your show, and he was much the same way, you talk about dividing the audience.
Yep.
You do things in your show that definitely, that you see that people go, ooh. And I remember one time, and we talked about this here in Johnny Carson, towards the end of the Tonight Show. He didn't do many interviews, and he did an interview. And one of the things he talked about, his observation of comics, was that he felt like at a point when a comic, especially comics, been doing it for a long time, and they begin to move away from being funny and they start being philosophers. And he goes, and they miss the point. And I see your show I see you striving for a balance there, correct? You like to teach.
Well, I guess, I mean, I guess I should just do the show on top of a soapbox. So it would be, okay, now we get where we're at. But, I think a lot of good comedians already are philosophers, but they're not recognized as that. And it takes a while for them to generate this. The problem is, they forget where the laughs are. You don't realize how difficult it is to try to be, I try to do stuff. I know, where I'm going to push your buttons, but the thing is to put a line here, get you to it, and then gently move it a little further, so when you walk out the door, you're at least going to entertain something that you never would have thought of, something you certainly aren't going to see on whatever magazine you're reading or whatever television show you're watching. So, and whether you take it home or not, it's just at least now you got at least some jokes that you can make fun of by the guy who talks it in a regular conversation with you, or when you're out, at a cocktail party. So but it still has to be kind of funny, and it's easy just to play to one side, to just preach to the choir. That's why you really have guys like Bill Maher and then guys like Rush Limbaugh. They're not gathering any new people on their side. They're just saying, this is the people who want to listen to me. I understand that and I get it. But there's got to be somewhere in there where people can say, okay, look, here's a little bit from both sides, so that you can start thinking a little more from a broad perspective. Because we are getting pigeonholed. We don't realize, I think, how destructive it is for just the, critical thought. If you just constantly just reinforce what it is you believe, you can sit there. There's no difference between a fundamentalist Christian and a Taliban member who have this strong belief. A Taliban or fundamentalist Taliban's going to say, I'm going to strap a bomb to my chest and blow up the infidel. Or the fundamentalist Christian's going to say, well, all you got to do is step outside the abortion clinic and pop them off on the way out. That way you don't have to kill yourself. You hide up in a duck blind. Well, but then how do I see my 72 virgins? Well, you import them from Bangkok like we do. Come on now. Well, we can get together. Yes, we think the same way, don't we? It's, we're so focused on one, way of thinking.
Anyway,
that's my job. Glad you're here. Hope you liked it.
It was great. Questions from you guys?
Oh.
If there's anything. Yes, right back there. And I'll repeat the question for people.
Okay, on this side.
I'll repeat the question so people that are watching the podcast hear it too.
So for people that are starting out at open mic and like that, what would you recommend for learning how to write jokes?
If you're starting out as an open mic or a new comedian, what would Bob recommend as far as structure, writing, which you have great structure?
Yeah,
You don't wing it a lot.
No, I don't. There are some guys who can, and they're great at it. I'm just not that good at it.
I can't write.
I could only type. Because I came from a school. This is getting way across from what your question is, but I came a school of drama and theater and memorizing and getting myself out of the way so that I can be a true individual to make it. I studied with a guy named Sanford Meisner. I don't know if any of you are familiar. He was a famous acting coach back in the day. So I think comedy, though, is exactly like any art form. You have to learn the basics. There's a lot of books out there. You got to learn the structure. You got to learn what a setup is, what a joke is. How to tell a story, how to do it humorously. And then you got to talk from your own voice. The problem is it's mostly male-dominated, so everybody talks with their dick, which. But after a while,
it works.
It does. But after a while, you get rid of that, and you don't. Yes, you do.
And
does it still work? That's the problem. Is, 'cause
that's right. And
see, there's dick jokes everywhere. You can,
right.
see, dick jokes will make a room walk. It'll say, okay,
that's
we
right.
got it.
That's right. They're
so
gone.
I try
They're
not
outta here.
to, So I actually, but I think that's, but you start with what you know. If that's all you know, then start there. But, or whatever your job is, whatever, but I think there's a certain structure. There's different types. I mean, there really is not a school for it. I mean, we were talking earlier. You guys are trying to develop something here. So
yeah, we do workshops
and you do
here.
workshops here. And,
yes.
But it's not like you go to acting school or music school. But you have to. I mean, look, you're going to start by emulating and copying guys, which is okay. Most guys don't have, who are already established. You don't want to copy guys who are starting out at the same level you are, because then they get pissed off. But, you understand what Cosby and Carlin and Lenny Bruce, I mean, people don't realize, I think some of you were still around when Lenny Bruce, maybe all of you were around when Lenny Bruce. I mean, I have a very good friend of mine named Kelly Monteith, who's been on The Tonight Show, was on The Tonight Show when Carson was on, 50, 60 times. He was the first guy to say the word suck on late night television in the 70s. Now, you have to remember, we couldn't even say the word suck in the 70s. You go 20 years backward and see what Lenny Bruce was trying to get away with. And it was, nobody knows now how difficult that was. We all know what the guy went through. But you take those kind of guys and, you try to understand what they're trying to say. That's the joke. It's a jigsaw puzzle. If you have something you want to say, then you got to figure out how to form it out to get it to the point. I mean, I always wanted to, with the bit that I wrote about Republic after Mulligans. I mean, I always wanted to say, okay, how do you get these guys thinking together? So you start out really with the punchline, we killed democratic embryos. Then you go back up and you figure out how to set it up. If you come up with something that's clever and funny, you have to set it up so that it comes out of nowhere. And there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. There's plenty of books.
And I think
I expect to see you on stage tomorrow.
He's been up there. And it's something that you're passionate about. Yeah. I mean, especially anger fuels good comedy.
It does.
And I give an example is that I had a lady here in town that came through my comedy classes twice. The first time because she'd just been through a nasty divorce. And she had so much hatred towards this man, and she decided to vent it through writing something about him, what an asshole he was, and being able to get up on this stage and do it in front of people and make people laugh. And she did. And then she came back several years later after a double mastectomy from breast cancer. She was pissed off about the cancer.
Oh, look, I'm not saying cut your dick off.
No.
Do this, all right?
Don't do that.
In order to get into this.
Not yet.
Right, but
don't do that. But she came back and she vented that out. And when I've seen that so many times, I go, how wonderful would it be if we can teach people that every time you are angry about something, that you learn to use laughter to vent your anger and make people feel better while you're pissed off.
Yeah,
rather than beating the shit out of somebody,
That's true. So instead of having horns on our cars, we should have little whoopee cushion.
Yes.
Okay.
and as he
There's
said,
still
the truth is so funny because
it is,
it's so bizarre. You don't hear it. You so seldom hear the truth.
I don't know why we're so afraid of it. Really, it's not going to hurt. It really
and when
isn't.
you hear
it's
it,
just a different point of view.
Bizarre.
It is.
It's bizarre
to
hear the truth.
I hate to admit this to you guys, but cats can swim. Okay, that's the truth. Not right away, but you throw them in. They go to the bottom. Before they come up, these little bubbles rise off and go meow, meow, and they come up, but they can swim. So this whole bullshit about cats can't swim, and you don't have to wait an hour after you eat to go swimming. Okay, you're cracking your knuckles doesn't cause arthritis. I mean, pornography does not lead to crime. It leads to masturbation, is what it leads to. All right. And smoking marijuana does not lead to heroin. It leads to masturbation, but just not right away. Right? So.
After you eat.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
How many pages of jokes or how many different stories or lines or sequences
Well,
do you have? You say you operate like off of a...
Well, I memorize everything. A lot of guys are, can spitball and go through a real, but at certain points they always touch on. But now I would look at it as like time. I mean, I'd say probably 6 to 8 hours of stuff over the time, over my career that, you know, is really stuff that works, as opposed to this stuff, you know, this is kind of shit I'm making up, but it's, you know, I wouldn't put this in a show unless you guys were there asking me questions, I guess.
And I want to say, when you say that, so many of the headliners, that comedians that are professionals, develop an hour, and they stick with it for 20 years.
Well,
I've seen that a lot. I mean, more than not. The people who write as much as you do.
That's the old vaudevillian. I mean, you know, the guys who had the 5 minutes and they go around, they just did that 5 minutes, and the guys who did their 15 minutes, and it's easy in a big country because, you know, look, I can do this. I mean, I've changed things up a little bit. You've come back Friday or Saturday, there'll be different things, but it'll basically be the same. But I mean, Cosby was always good at this, where he would do something. It was like a conveyor belt. You put stuff on here. Say the conveyor belt's an hour long. You know, if you go and see him the next night, it's pretty much the same conveyor belt, but it's 3 months later, that shit's already fallen off, and he's got new stuff he's added here, and then by the, you know, the course of a year, it's a whole new hour of material, and that's kind of how we work. I do it a little different just because of the acting background. I will write a whole 5-10 minute piece and just go for it, and it's painful because if the first part, there's no laughs, I mean, you're just gonna suck it through the whole rest of the 5-6 minutes, but, you know, it doesn't really, you know, bother me that much because I'm getting something out of it.
Is that
So,
because of your theater background?
yeah, I think so.
Another question? Anything? Thank you very much for hanging
wonderful.
out
Yeah.
tonight. We appreciate it. Please exit that way and check our website for future shows and tell people about Bobby. He'll be here through Saturday. Good night.